Welcome and thank you for joining today's webinar titled Next Generation Mobility, Becoming an Experienced Enterprise. If you have any questions, you can submit them at any time in the Adobe Connect questions pane. Today's webinar is part of a 3-webinar series on the Coney Multichannel Experience Cloud. Go to the URL displayed on the bottom of your screen for more details and to register. At this point, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today. Harold Goldberg is the Chief Marketing Officer for Coney. Harold brings more than 25 years of experience in senior marketing, strategy, and sales roles at top-tier software companies. Prior to Coney, Harold held multiple senior and C-level roles with Merced Systems as CMO, Zend Technologies as CEO, and BMC Software as Senior Vice President of Worldwide Marketing. Thank you, Harold, for joining us today. We're looking forward to hearing your presentation. With that, I'll hand it over to Harold.
Great. Thank you very much, Sohail. And welcome, everyone, from around the world. We've got international participation today. And as Sohail said, this is a series, the beginning of a series of webinars we're going to do. There'll actually be a 4th one that we'll put on the agenda shortly, describing our visualization product. But we'll get to that towards the end. So let me get started and kind of put some context behind what we're experiencing today and why we're calling this the Experience Enterprise. If you look at where we've been for the last 30 years, we have been on a journey in technology. And that journey started, obviously, with the mainframe, where we just started to gather data and get a presentation of our business, but purely from a data point of view. That moved into the client-server world, where for the first time with the advent of PCs and a powerful tool on our desk, we were able to have a rich experience. It was still, though, very much data-driven and very form-driven, but it allowed us to start thinking about workflow. It allowed us to actually start thinking about a more holistic business enterprise, but once again, still driven from a data-centric view. Then came the web about 10, 15 years ago, 1995, 96 to be precise. And now we had a rich client view, and we started to move into a slightly more interactive world with e-commerce sites. You could get immediate feedback. You could do survey. But still, if you think about it, we went from a centralized world in the mainframe world to a client-server world. And then, in some ways, the web centralized it again. We had a browser experience, but it was very much data-driven and mapping this front-end browser to the back-end data. We are now in a completely different type of paradigm with mobility. In some ways, you could argue we're back to the client-server world because I have this very powerful device, in many cases more powerful than the PC that I had 10, 15 years ago on my desktop. And it is not data-driven. It is 100% experience-driven. And that means that we need to think differently about how we develop apps and what that experience is going to look like for all the different stakeholders who have a mobile device. And that's what I want to talk about today, is what that means for the enterprise, what that means for the line of business, and how we are entering a new phase of technology and technology rollout for enterprises with mobility at the center. If you look at what we are seeing today, mobility is everywhere. I don't think I have to make that statement, but I heard an interesting anecdote, which is probably true, and I've experienced it myself, which is 2-3 years ago, if you woke up in the morning and left the house and you forgot your wallet, you would probably turn around and get your wallet and drive into work. Today, if you forgot your wallet and your smartphone, you would turn around and take your smartphone and probably leave your wallet behind. Because as is on this left side of this picture, we are probably accessing a phone 150 to 200 times a day. It has become part of us. It has become part of our personal life through texting and social. It has become part of our business life to get email and information. It is an integral part about how we do business and is actually changing the way we do business. And this week alone, we've seen the introduction of Samsung and Sony introducing their watches. So this is going to move not just from the introduction of the iPhone 4 or 5 years ago and then the iPad. We are going to see a proliferation of devices, and this Christmas season will be the next wave of these devices, which will change and modify our behavior even more as it comes to the mobile world. So, as we've seen with technology, it's often the user that leads the path. We see it in our consumer world, and then we come into the enterprise. And what's been going on in the enterprise is a bit of a schism, and that schism is playing itself out as following. The IT organization has been spending the last 10, 15 years really supporting the core businesses, rolling out CRM systems, rolling out ERP systems, and making, quite frankly, our organizations much more efficient and much more effective. They've also been focusing on consolidation, both physical consolidation to get costs under control, as well as virtual consolidation, with virtualization, moving stuff to the cloud, finding other ways to take disparate organizations and pieces of data and bringing them together. And finally, on top of that, they've layered on security, and security I look at kind of two ways. One is they put up a defense mechanism against malware and spanware on the outside, but they've also looked at provisioning and who has access to what information, and a governance process. As more and more applications and IT projects get developed, we need a more structured and formal governance process. That's all great. But if you look at the top side of this slide, the line of business has a very different agenda. The user, whether it be a customer, a partner, an employee, an investor, a stakeholder in your organization, is really looking for a great experience. It is really, truly today all about the experience, whether it's a decision about to buy something on a mobile commerce site, or whether you're a service person in someone's home or someone's office and you need to look up an inventory part. I need to have that information right now in this point in time. And how I get that information is just as important as the accuracy of the information itself. Secondly, social and the whole advent of collaboration has changed the way we work, and it's going to continue to push the envelope on how we're working, and that needs to be built into this experiential way of thinking about apps. And then finally, we've made huge investments in data and analytics over the last 5, 6 years, and end users want access to this information. And they don't want access in a daily report or a monthly report. They want up-to-the-minute capability to be able to make real-time decisions on staffing, on revenue, on inventory management, and quite frankly, on how they're doing from a customer service and customer support level for their customers. Now, Coney has been doing projects for many years in this area, and one of the things that we have realized is that we are going through a phase now that we are calling the next generation experience, and you need to have a platform that ties together these two worlds so that the business user can get what it is that they need to get when they get it, and I'll go into a little more detail in a moment, but at the same time, you're taking advantage of, quite frankly, great work that the IT organization has done to make sure that you have your data of records, you are consolidating, and you have your governance. And one of the ways that we're thinking about this is that we're actually moving into a generation of, instead of having your data of record, you now really have to have an experience of record, which is pushing all of this data that we have collected further out into the edge of the organization. And so how does that manifest itself? This may be a little simplistic, but I think there's really 3 major stakeholders here. There's the line of business, and the line of business has a pretty straightforward request at this point, which is that I need access to all of the data and all of the apps wherever I am, and I need it on any device. So whether it be on a browser, because I'm sitting at my desk, or it's at on my smartphone, or I may have a personal and a company phone, so I may have multiple devices. It shouldn't matter. The experience should be the same, optimized obviously for each one of those devices, but I need to have that information where I need it. The developer, however, understands this and is facing a very different struggle, which is if you really do have 3 or 4 different devices and there are more coming on board, how do I develop applications for all these different platforms, and how do I ensure that the experience is going to be optimized for every one of those different platforms. And then finally, the IT part of the organization is looking at a way to manage all of this, to provision it appropriately, and to make sure that they are keeping that level of security that they have spent the last decade, quite frankly, building, to ensure that the right information is going in and out of the organization and the bad information is not getting there. So we have looked at this, and we think there is a way to solve this. First of all, we have to change the way we think. We really need to look at the business line of business and say, let's look at the experience first and design our applications and design our business processes from the experience in, not so much from the data out. And so that's kind of the first step that, and doing many projects over the last 5 years, is very, very clear to us. Secondly, we can't just do a point project. We can't just develop an app for the iPhone and say, that's it, we're done. In fact, I heard a really interesting anecdote from an analyst the other day, which was a saying that they say they give a puppy for Christmas. Well, you don't give a puppy for Christmas. A puppy is for a lifetime. You may get it at Christmas, but you have to take care of that puppy throughout the entire life of the puppy. Well, an app is actually no different. You develop that app, you're going to have to come out with revisions to it, modifications. Once you build it, it's an ongoing process. And then as you start building it for other platforms, the issues around it really do start magnifying. And then finally, security needs to start thinking about edge optimization as much as they're thinking about their data protection. And that means, and what has been happening right now in the enterprise, is that all three of these pieces have been playing in silos. They haven't really thought about this problem together. And as we move into this next generation of experience-developed applications, all three of these areas have to come together. So that's what we've been thinking about here at Coney. We know that the industry today is very much in a first generation, I'll call it, app development, where many point apps were developed, pushed out very successfully, and have really had dramatic changes in the business. But now we're moving from a world where an enterprise may have 5 to 10 apps to an organization will have hundreds and eventually hundreds of apps that they need to support going forward. So let me take a minute and just briefly explain who Coney is and how, and we'll get into how we're approaching this problem. We were founded 7 years ago specifically and only to develop mobile capability and mobile apps. We developed a very sophisticated app development platform, and just this August, we were recognized by Gartner as one of the top 3 leaders in the Magic Quadrant, in the Leaders Magic Quadrant. We're very excited about that. And that is actually a testament not only to what Coney has been able to build, but what our over 350 customers have been able to build. And we'll talk a little bit about our customers in a moment. We've experienced phenomenal growth, but the reason we've experienced this growth is that we have from the beginning been building apps, as I've described, from the experience in and not necessarily from the data out. And it's given us a perspective in how apps not only should be developed, but are probably going to be developed over the next 3 to 4 years, and we've tried to build technology that supports that vision. We've done it with great customers. If you look at this customer list, this is only a sampling of the customer list. We've done it with really customers in every possible, well, not every possible, but most of the major verticals. So financial services, healthcare, insurance, manufacturing, supply chain, mining, transportation. We have a broad and deep breadth of customers that we've been able to develop these apps for, and quite frankly learn, both us as well as our customers, on what needs to go into a first, second, and now third generation set of applications. We also understand that we cannot do it alone. These apps, whether they be business-to-consumer apps or what we call business-to-enterprise apps, an app that is mobilizing your CRM system or an app that's mobilizing your HR and T&E systems, has to be done with a pretty deep level of understanding of the key business processes that you're trying to mobilize. And so we have developed an extensive we're well over 100 partners at this point, where we have a combination of deep technical knowledge as well as deep business process knowledge. And this is a global statement. We've got 20 of the top 20 best SIs, and now we're starting to develop partnerships and develop a developer community with well over 4,000 trained developers in this community who can build, modify, and extend apps for your organization. And we're very excited about this community. They have brought a lot to Coney and will continue to bring a lot as we grow and expand. But I think the thing that we're most excited about is that we actually bring some real value to customers. So we have a large hospitality hotel chain that built out a app for you to book a room, register, and they really thought, based on their web experience, that they would generate somewhere between $150 to $200 million in their first year. Well, they actually generated close to $750 million, and it's one of the top apps now on the iStore and in the Android world. And their whole business has really been transformed, where they're not only now just taking reservations for those apps, they're now looking at building apps for the in-room experience. When you check into a hotel, being able to control the air conditioning and heating and television and all the rest of it from your own device, from your own iPad or your own iPhone. Similarly, we have a number of airlines that are customers of ours, and they've seen equal, if not greater, bookings coming in from the mobile devices and changes. I'm sure I travel a lot. I'm sure many of you travel a lot. You become very reliant on your mobile device capability to see if there's a flight delay or if you want to change a connection and get on a different flight. Really wonderful savings, and as I said before, real-time capability. And you judge how well that app is doing based on the actual experience of the app. So we looked at this world. We looked at how it is that our customers are using our apps. And so, Hill, if you could advance to the next slide, I would appreciate it. Are we there? Yeah. And what we launched last week is a completely new set of capabilities built on the infrastructure that Coney already had. And you can go to the next slide, next build of this slide, please. We have, no, before that, thank you. We have built out a set of cloud offerings beginning with the design phase. One of the things that we have learned in many of these projects is that about 70% of the mistakes and errors that occur in the app rollout actually could be prevented in the design phase. And one of the reasons for that is the way applications are designed today. It's a very text-based, verbal-based process. The line of business will sit down, describe to a developer or a designer what it is they're looking for, what they're expecting that app to actually be able to do for them. And then they will basically come back a certain period of time later and see what it is that they thought they were getting transformed into an actual app. The problem is that the line of business has a certain idea about what they want that app to be able to do, and the developer doesn't necessarily understand 100% of what they want. And so we launched last week something we're calling the Visualization Cloud. And what the Visualization Cloud is a true WYSIWYG capability to develop an app in real time, and more importantly, share it in a collaborative fashion with both the developers and the line of business so that you can get a true representation of what that app needs to be. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as well. We also launched, and is available today on Coney.com, our Coney Developer Cloud. And the Coney Developer Cloud is a combination of our IDE, the Coney Studio, as well as all of the back-end services, which I'll describe in a moment. And then as a final piece, the Coney Management Cloud. So that what we're really offering in the Multichannel Experience Cloud is a beginning to end of app management. Design, develop, manage, all built out on the cloud foundation. We have partnered strongly with Amazon on this cloud foundation. But we also have many customers who want to get this and run it on-prem, and so we offer these capabilities three ways: on-premise, in a managed private cloud, which we do for some customers, and finally in the public cloud. And then on top of that, Coney has had and continues to build out a set of out-of-the-box applications. We have well over 25 applications today, both on the customer-facing side and the enterprise-facing side, so that if you want to get up and running quickly, you can take one of these apps and be in production much, much faster than having to develop it yourself, set up your own data systems, your own servers, et cetera, to get it up and running. So let me take a moment and go into a little more detail on each one of these. The Coney Visualization Cloud, one of the things that we think is fundamentally missing in this market and is different about what we built here is the collaboration aspect. If you are trying to build an experience-based app, you need to get those experiences into the app early on in the process. And the way to do that is to either virtually or physically sit down with the line of business owner who has certain expectations about this app, the designer who has ideas about what works best from a UI and UX perspective, the developer, as well as potentially other stakeholders that you want to test it in. And so that is the capability and are the capabilities that we've built into the virtualization cloud. Once you have this WYSIWYG type of app, we then have built in an integrated capability to transfer it to our IDE. However, I do want to point out that you can just use the virtualization tool to develop an app, and then you can use your own tools if that's what you want to do, and open source or other capabilities that you've already invested in your organization to develop that app. And then the final piece, as I mentioned before, is a management capability. And what I'd like to do now is just spend a few minutes to go into detail on each one of these. But over the next couple of weeks, we've already scheduled the Coney Developer Cloud webinar, which will be next week, and a Coney Management Cloud, which is also coming up in the next couple of weeks. And then probably in the beginning of November, we'll schedule the Coney Visualization Cloud to go into more detail and actually do a full-blown demo on each one of these. But let me start with the Coney Visualization. So one of the exciting things about Coney Visualization is that the people who built it were designers. They were not developers. That's number one. Number two, we actually used the Coney platform to build our own tool. So as they say, we're drinking our own champagne. And everyone that we've shown it to, and if you go to our site and want to register to download in our beta program, you too can see it. It truly is an ability for non-developers, and I'm saying that on purpose, the line of business who may not understand all the intricacies of the development, and even the designer who's looking to build out that really great experience. It's an opportunity to build out a true WYSIWYG capability for a device, but more importantly, then to show the line of business how it's going to behave and how it's going to look on other types of devices. So if you have an iPad that you're developing for, and then you also want to show how it's going to appear on the Samsung Galaxy, you can very quickly show what are the native capabilities that I'm going to get on the iPad, what are the native capabilities I'm going to get on the Galaxy, how they're going to be different, why they're going to be different. And then when I have that initial design built, I can post this design up to the cloud. It actually will show up on that device, on a Galaxy or on an iPhone. I can, as the business owner, make iterations. I can say, I tried this. I didn't like the way this button was laid out. I don't like the gradient levels. I want this changed. I can put in notes, and I can send it back to the designer. Not only that, we've built into this collaboration a capability to actually have me see everyone else's iterations so that I don't have to go through and make the same suggestions that other people have already made. And so I truly do have a collaborative environment to do design, and do design in a multi-channel environment. Now, this is true for hybrid, native, and HTML5. So it doesn't really matter how you want to design your app. We've got you covered on all the three major ways that people kind of think about what they want to do. And then with a real-time preview capability, I can see the differences of what I'm going to get with HTML5 versus some of the controls that I may want to have doing a native capability. we've integrated this to our developer studio so that once again, it passes over and now the developer really doesn't have to guess about what was in the mind of the designer or in the line of business. And I've talked about the real-time collaboration, but I think the other thing that is really important is that this tool now gives me the ability to do requirements gathering, both up front, but I think even more importantly, as that app lives on in version 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, so that you can continually gather new requirements, new feedback, continue iterating, because this app is not going to go away. And once again, you can cut down and compress the amount of time it takes to develop that next version because you have a method to collect that information and collect it in a much more accurate way so that people can actually see what the business logic is, they can see how it's going to lay out, they can see how it's going to work for them, and they don't have to guess, quite frankly. So that is the Coney Visualization Cloud. As you can tell, we are very excited about this. We've shown this to a number of our customers. They want it. And we were at we kicked this off last week at the Gartner Symposium. We had maybe 1,000 people, close to 1,000 people come by and take a look at this. As I said, you can sign up for beta today, and our plan right now is to go GA sometime in early November. Now, once you have this design, you want to put it into production as quickly as possible, and you want to do that with a developer who's able to build out for you the design that you've just handed over in a multi-channel way. So one of the things that we have, Coney's been known for, and we continue to not only stress, but the market is continuing to create value here for us, is the multi-channel nature of what we do. You don't have to build all the individual siloed apps as many organizations are doing today. We really do take very seriously the capability to build out the app once. We support today 7 different operating systems, iOS, Android, Windows 8, and some of the older ones, BlackBerry. There's so many BlackBerries out there, Symbian. And we have a device library today of well over 10,000 devices so that you can pull up the specific device and see how you're using the real estate. Because as you've developed that app, both in the visualizer and now hardwiring it and wireframing it, it's really important to understand the real estate that you have in your specific device and optimize for it, including the browser. So when I'm talking about multi-channel, I'm also talking about HTML5. There are a lot of organizations that are going through a transition of their websites from HTML4 to HTML5, and there's no reason to think about the web as a separate silo. You should really be thinking about app development across the board, including the browser. And that's something that we enabled you to do. We have built this on an enterprise-grade cloud service. Really important, given the size of these apps, how quickly they grow. You may be a small company, but you may have a lot of traffic coming into your organization, or you may have a very complex app that has a lot of data. We have optimized as best we can based on the experiences we have with our existing Global 2000 customers, and we've taken that capability and built it into our cloud services. We've clearly built this from a designer's perspective, so it's a very intuitive drag-and-drop capability. And in this release, we've also exposed a set of analytics and reporting so you can see how the app is performing. You can see who's using it, which screens they're using, where they get stuck, which ones are being abandoned. And so it helps you constantly refine the experience and make it easier and more acceptable for your stakeholders, both inside the organization and the consumer base. And as I said, we're going to run a webinar a little later in the month that goes much deeper into the development cloud and its capabilities. The one thing I will say is that we have built out a fairly extensive cloud set of services for account provisioning, for billing, for management, so that it's very easy to build an app quickly, obviously with visualization, to prototype it, move it into the IDE, develop it and wireframe it, expose all the back-end data. So we have a complete set of integrators. We can bring in nearly any piece of data and expose it to the developer so that when they're developing the app, they have access to that data and they can see the data streams that are available to them. And then spin up a cloud to put it up there in a limited release and then move it into production fairly quickly. As we know from everything that I've described so far, and I think everyone has experienced with apps, the whole software development life cycle with apps has been compressed. We don't have 6 months or 12 months. We have 4 to 6 weeks to do what we used to do in 6 to 9 months. And everything that we're trying to do, both with Visualizer and the Development Cloud and management, is to help you compress that time as reasonably as possible while maintaining a very high level of quality and a very high level of scalability. And then finally, on the SDLC layer, we have the Coney Management Cloud. And what we announced last week was a suite that included mobile device management, mobile app management, a version of it in the cloud. We launched our first version of mobile app management about 9 months ago. And then coming up is mobile content management, which will be coming out in next quarter. And one of the unique things that we think is really important is that this market today is very siloed and also somewhat commoditized. Everyone has tried to figure out how they basically do a security and management process around mobile device management. But in reality, we should be thinking about management as part of the design and development process. And I'll give you a very simple example. If I am building a mobile CRM application, I should be able to build right in at the point of development the provisioning and the capabilities for a sales manager and what data and information they should see, what access they should see. I should be able to take advantage of geolocation capabilities. So if I have the Western region, all of that information in the Western region will be exposed to me based on geolocation information. If I move out of that region and it's a personal BYOD device, it'll turn off that access, and I won't be able to see other points of information. I can do context-aware information in the same way. So if you think about a retail app, and I'm walking by a store, pop up a coupon so that I can actually entice my customer to go into the store and be able to buy something that I may not have been thinking about, but I've got enough information about the apps that that person has been using. Same is true for inventory management. I was talking to someone who does cell phone maintenance, cell tower maintenance. And so the ability to be able to know where that person is, access to their inventory, and where the closest part may be, these are all things that you can do both in the app as well as through the management cloud. And so one of the interesting things that we've done is we've tried to look at this holistically, end-to-end, so that management is not the silo of just security, but is looking at it in a comprehensive manner as part of the development cycle and as part of the life cycle of the apps. And then finally, Coney runs and has built a number of apps, as I said, on both the customer-facing as well as the employee-facing. The apps that have been extremely successful in this area are ones where business processes are well understood, but as those processes get better understood in areas such as utilities, so we have bill paying app, right, for a utility company that wants to be able to roll something out to their customers, but at the same time you also may want a field service app for all the trucks that are rolling around, keeping the utility successful. So if you think about that example, you may have a storm coming up, and you want your customers to know there's a storm coming up. There may be power outages, and at the same time you're doing scheduling and making sure the trucks are ready to roll right after the storm to go and do repairs. We have retail banking apps. We have healthcare apps. It's a way for an organization to very quickly get up and running. When I say quickly, 90 to 120 days as opposed to 6 to 9 months to get an enterprise app cut over. And we are continuing to expand and grow this portfolio of apps. Many of our partners that I mentioned earlier have apps that they have built out for customers that are available. And so as this ecosystem grows, it means that you as prospects and customers can make the decision, do I want a platform to be able to build it out myself? Do I want to work with a partner, or do I want to buy an off-the-shelf app? And all of these apps that I've described are obviously built on our platform. So when you get an app from Coney, you're also getting the developer platform. You're getting all the benefits of the back-end capabilities that are found in the app. So that is what we launched last week. It's a broad set of portfolios. But let me go back to what I said earlier. it's really, the reason we're doing this is we do believe we are in, it's an old term, but we are in a paradigm shift when it comes to app development and app rollout. And we're moving from these systems of record, which is where the data was stored, to systems of engagement, which is all occurring out on the edge in these different devices. And it's really incumbent on IT organizations and line of business to shift the thinking to say, how am I going to respond to this, because it's certainly happening, and how am I going to manage it and take advantage of it both from a competitive point of view as well as from a cost and control point of view. So one of the things that Coney has been able to do over the last number of years is we, as I said, have been involved with literally hundreds of projects to roll out these apps. And one of the questions that we get asked often is, okay, where do I start? How do I begin this journey to get to be an experienced enterprise? And this is a very simplistic version, but one of the things that we've started to do is we've started to do mobile workshops with prospects and customers who will come in for a day or two and just map out where you think you are today. So on the left side, this is where many, I would say, first-generation app companies are. Kind of have a set of siloed development teams. They started with whatever your preferred device was, Android or iPhone. They built up that app, then they replicated it again for the next operating system. Then Windows 8 came out, and the enterprise is moving all their desktops to Windows 8, so how am I going to take my app and make that work? And the more mature organizations have started to, they kind of hit a wall at that point and say, I've got 3 or 4 developer teams, or I'm using an outside agency to be able to do this. I really need to think about this holistically from a multi-channel point of view. Often, and once again, this is not a judgment or a value statement, this is just how typically technology gets rolled out. It's on a project base. I need an app. I need an app for a particular area, whether it be an external-facing app or an internal-facing app, and they start on a project base. Before they know it, they are running 5, 6, 10, 15, 20 apps, and realizing that each one of those projects has taken on a life of its own. And it's at that point where you need to take a step back and really say, okay, I need to have some sort of mobility center of excellence, which is what we see in a lot of these organizations. And we've certainly helped them, or they've brought us in after they've gone through this process to say, okay, I need to standardize all of my development, or at least provide to my organization a single unified approach. And that often leads to, I'm going to take a platform approach, or I'm going to take an off-the-shelf apps approach to the organization. The third, which I think we're definitely in, is the whole first-generation BYOD. It's been driven a lot by IT security or CTOs or architects of an organization. But once again, it's kind of been done in a siloed approach without really thinking about how am I going to optimize the edge of my organization for multi-channel and for really a flood of apps that we're going to see over the next 3 to 5 years. And then I go back to where I started, that we are moving from an environment that was very much developer-focused, and rightly so. We went to a lot of our web developers or people who are early in mobility and said, I need this app, please develop it for me. They took a very data-centric approach. How do I get the data that you want on this app and put it out there, as opposed to an experience-driven approach, where you're actually now bringing into a collaborative capability the designer, the line of business, and the developer, thinking about it from the experience in, and then tying it back in a way to the data sources that you have throughout the organization. And so what we typically do, and what ends up happening, is that we see customers kind of go through a very, once again, simplified 3-step process. We have a much more in-depth blueprint that we work with customers and prospects on, which is first assess what we're calling your experience quotient. So how well understood is it in the organization that I need to think about this from the experience in as opposed from the data out? And if I look at my apps and I look at the capabilities that I have developed over the last couple of years, how well do they match up to this experience quotient? Then, and we've done this with a variety of different methods, but our mobile app workshop has been very successful, where we'll come in and we'll put the key stakeholders in the room and literally hand out sticky pads and whiteboards and say, let's put up all the different business processes and apps that you may want on a mobile device. So that we can start prioritizing and understanding if there is overlap, if there are capabilities that we already have in other parts of our organization that could be shared, and then really build out a 2 to 3 year roadmap as opposed to a highly reactive, I need to mobilize my CRM system. Oh, there's also some billing information that I should probably have there, so there was a separate billing app that I built, and now there's a T&E app that I built, and if you're in healthcare, there's a physician scheduling app that I want to build. Instead, making this list, coming up with it from a holistic point of view, and then building out a roadmap. And then, quite frankly, just as we saw in the generation of the web and the generation of the client server before that, establishing centers of excellence, in this case a mobile center of excellence, where you really have a governance, security, design, and management and maintainability and sustainability set of characteristics, those key stakeholders working together in an integrated manner so that they can continue to support this very dramatic change that we are seeing in the IT landscape today. And we have many examples of organizations that have done this well and that are on various stages of this path. I, over the last 6 months, have met probably at this point with literally hundreds of CIOs. I wouldn't exaggerate when I say most people are really at that first generation or generation and a half in their mobile strategy. We have a long road ahead of us. It's a very exciting road, and it's one of the reasons that Coney has very intentionally built out these capabilities so that we can offer you a complete end-to-end software development lifecycle set of capabilities, starting at design, moving into development, management, having your apps built on top of that platform, and then having the agility and flexibility to spin up capacity and capability in the cloud when you need it and at any point that you need it. I don't have access to the questions. If there are questions, I'd be happy to respond either through email afterwards and we can get some answers back to you. But I hope this was helpful. As I said before, we will be running 2 more webinars, one on our development cloud and one on our management cloud. They're on our website, and you can register for them now, and then we'll be scheduling the last one, which will be our visualization cloud, probably in the second week in November, and I invite you to come back to that. And I hope that this was helpful and informative. So Hill, let me turn it back to you.
Thank you, Harold. And yes, there are questions in the Q&A pane, and we will definitely respond to each of them via email. With that, today's webinar comes to an end. Thank you for attending this webinar. A link to the recording will be emailed to all the registrants. You will see a short survey appear at the end of the webinar. Please take a few minutes to let us know your thoughts. Once again, I'd like to thank Harold for presenting.